then they strip search you and they give you your clothing, and they're peeling the electrodes off of me still. And it just was your basic nightmare. And I get into the elevator and there's a guy next to me and he's going to be dropped off at the guy floor. And we're standing there, we're riding up one of those big industrial elevators. And he turns to me and he goes, "Ask for socks."
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges, spirituality, ADHD, or maybe just family, travel, and logistics. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison, with your mystery meat sandwich.
Okay, a vision for you. For most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good. But not so with us in those last days of heavy drinking. The old pleasures were gone. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an insistent yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and a heartbreaking obsession that some new miracle of control would enable us to do it. There was always one more attempt and one more failure. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily we did. Then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. Now and then a serious drinker, being dry at the moment, says, "I don't miss it at all. Feel better, work better, having a better time." As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark, trying to keep up his spirits. He fools himself. Inwardly, he would give anything to take half a dozen drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. So, I'm going to stop right there in terms of the reading, and I will pick it up to close the Chaplains Chat today after I talk a little bit about my own experience.
And now, onto the Chaplains Chat.
If you're afraid that this part might be a little bit of a Debbie Downer, I just want to tell you that it all turns out wonderfully. So please try to just hang in there, and I'm going to try not to make it too dark or triggering, but just wanted to let you know ahead of time that I'll be pretty explicit with how things went down, specifically how I was feeling, how I was dealing with all of the processes that happened to me. And I try and keep in mind that this is not necessarily just a podcast for alcoholics in recovery, which we're extremely used to talking about our story in this very frank and honest manner. So I just want to make that clear that I am aware that others are listening. And so I just want to let you know it's probably a PG-13 podcast coming at you. And then I'm going to do my very best to just end it on a positive note. But I feel like some of these details that I'll share today, they need to be shared because addiction touches so many of us. In fact, it touches most of us. So if it's not you personally who is dealing with it or has dealt with it, it might be somebody else that you know. It might be a family member, somebody you work with. And so I think it helps create a space of empathy when we know what someone else is going through. So here's the deal. My life became completely unmanageable. So when I think of what a manager is, I think of somebody who gets the stuff done, right? Has figured out a system, has worked out an organization, a structure, a foundation, and basically has a way of living their life that's working. And I got to the point where I could not be in charge of my own life. That's how bad it got. And after I started taking the Xanax and all of that, it was just a pretty quick spiral into me not being able to be trusted with anything. I mean, I had all these consequences, right? Popping up around me. And I just thought I was so unhappy and so depressed. And I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. And I'm not saying I didn't have it. I totally believe that I did because I've also experienced that completely sober after being sober for years. And so I definitely believe that I had it, but I think it was amplified by by the alcohol just a little bit because alcohol is a depressant. So if one is depressed, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to pour gasoline on that fire, right? And so I really had this realization that I was kind of stuck. I had this full-time job of trying to act like I wasn't drinking as much as I was, but I was just losing my functionality, right? And therefore, I was also kind of losing my mind. By this point in time, I had fallen down the stairs drunk and broken a leg while trying to carry my daughter upstairs. So we got through all of that. Another time, my husband went out of town and I had my very own when a man loves a woman moment where I didn't crash through the shower door, but I passed out in the shower and I fell and I broke my nose. So I had all of the signs of alcoholism. And I was totally unwilling to admit that I was an alcoholic. Inside, by this point, I knew I could not quit on my own. I knew it. I knew that we had reached the point of no return. I was too scared to even try to quit. And I didn't know what I didn't know. So the idea of going to a treatment center was pretty much the worst thing I could imagine. And the reason why is I thought, my gosh, if I go to a treatment center, then everybody will know that I'm an alcoholic. And if they know that, then I kind of lose my drinking card forever. I didn't know much about Alcoholics Anonymous or getting sober or substance use disorder. I didn't know anything about it except that they were going to require abstinence from alcohol. And you know what? I had too much pride and ego to even go there. I just did not, I didn't want to think about having to deal with that. I thought alcohol was my treat. I just thought, well, I work hard and this is fun. And by that point in time, it was no longer fun. Just like it says in this chapter. I mean, the old memory, they were but memories, right? I just got to the point where every day I didn't have a choice whether or not I was going to drink. I knew I was going to drink. I drank all day at this point. And my husband came to me around Christmas time and said, you have a substance abuse problem with alcohol. And I want to give you an opportunity to go away and get healthy and work on your depression. It's the only way he could kind of get me to even entertain the idea of rehab. And so because my best friend had gone away to rehab in the fall, and she was the one who would help me to get rid of my empty bottles, because she was the one who would, drink with me and go crazy with me. I was also mourning the loss of her presence in my life. And she didn't ditch me or not come around me anymore. In fact, quite the opposite. She still stayed by my side as much as she could while still protecting her own self. And she was newly sober and probably, to an extent now looking back over a decade later, it probably actually helped her to see how horrible I was at that point. My entire viewpoints were skewed. My whole lens that I saw life through was not real. It was almost as if I were literally going crazy. And I was. At least the 12-step literature tells us that, alcoholism is a disease, and it's a 3-part disease, spiritually, mentally, and physically a disease. And so I just really missed her. I missed being around her. I missed her being as sick as I was. And the thing with alcoholics is they want people to remain in their sickness with them, because somehow in our twisted brains, or I'll speak for myself, my twisted brain, I thought that made it okay. If somebody else was as sick as I am, it meant it was all right. And when I no longer had her, and like this literature says that I just read in A Vision for You, the less people tolerated us, the lonelier we became. And so that was me. And when my husband suggested that maybe I go away and work on my depression, quote, I really didn't have another choice. And I kind of knew that I couldn't carry on the way I was carrying on, but I just couldn't see how this was ever going to work for me. But I went under the guise of, oh, well, I'm just going to go get some counseling, So I drank the whole way down on the plane. I just, by this point was having alcoholic panic attacks, and I just could not face life anymore without alcohol at any level. And, before getting on the plane, I was that person who couldn't empty my dishwasher suddenly without drinking. I needed alcohol physically at this point. So I drank all the way down, and I was just paranoid. I had that alcoholic paranoia when you're constantly at this kind of low level drunkenness. And I just thought everybody was on to me and everybody knew. And P.S., they probably did. But I just had that kind of hypersensitivity that was all about myself. I just couldn't even think past my own issues. I was just so uncomfortable in my own skin. And so I get off the plane. We go to the treatment center. I'm crying. I feel completely abandoned by my husband at this point. I remember watching him walk away after we signed the paperwork, and I just was like, I can't believe he's leaving me here. I just remember thinking, you really don't love me. And I thought for sure any minute now he would just turn around, he would walk back to get me, and everything would be fine. He'd just change his mind and take me home. I mean, this is the state of mind I was in, okay? Like he had literally just put down cash for me to go to treatment. And then I'm pretty convinced he's going to just turn around and come get me. And that did not happen, right? And so they settled me into rehab, and I had a wonderful housemate named Louise, and she kind of told me how things went at rehab. I mean, I didn't know anything about it. And so she kind of shared the schedule with me, and she was like, I understand what it's like. You first get here, you're scared. And she was just an angel. I'm just so grateful for her. And at the end of my time there, I still did not think, I was not fully convinced to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. In fact, I will tell you that I made up my mind that I was going to get out of treatment and drink one day when we were on a walk. We were on a walk, and I walked past an Italian restaurant that was not far from where our house was. They divided us up into different houses at the treatment center where I was. We walked past this little restaurant, and it had all these bottles of wine in the window. And I just got that memory back of like how fun it was. Just, oh man, wasn't that great? The second drink just really made me feel warm and comfortable and safe and like I could do anything. And I missed that feeling so much. It was as if I completely was right back there when I was able to control my drinking and was enjoying it. When I left rehab, I coined out, and it's kind of when everybody passes a coin around in the 12-step fellowship. If you've ever been in rehab, you know what that is. It's kind of well wishes on your day that you're leaving, and they pass a coin around, and everybody rubs that coin a little bit with their hands and gives it some good kind of juju, just some kind of good mojo. And so there I am at John Wayne Airport, and I could not get to the bar fast enough. I mean, I was like salivating by this point. So I had made like a full-on plan. I knew I was going to relapse, and I could not wait. And I got through security. I went to that bar, and I ordered a glass of something and another glass of something. I think I had several. I can't really remember. At this very moment, I'm not reading a script or anything like that, so I can't remember. I think pretty sure it's in my first book, Eternally Expecting. But I too know this. I drank all the way home. My husband picked me up from the airport. I was drunk because I had also stopped at the airport lounge. Part of my husband's company perks is, the lounge membership. And so they were pretty used to me there. I had a buddy there and, thought I'd swing in to say hi to her. And God knows how long I was in there. I just don't even know. And my husband picked me up and basically was playing it off very nicely, but kind of devastated, kind of like, what in the world happened? Why am I picking you up drunk? I mean, it did not equate to him, of course, as it wouldn't. And so I came home, I saw my kids. My kids had actually visited me, sidebar, a couple times in Orange County. Andrew had brought them down to see me, and it just, it was painful for them. It was painful for me and for Andrew. And, it was just, they didn't understand. And I didn't really understand. And we were on kind of off footing. We were just off. So we get home, we settle into normal life again, quote, normal life. And I spent the next 2 weeks drinking and just basically was trying to control it. Slipped right back into my old behaviors with my neighbors, but was telling them, oh, look, I've learned now to control my drinking. And I don't know who believed me and who didn't, but it seemed like I had kind of convinced some folks that maybe I was cured. So, and from their perspective, whatever they believed or didn't believe about that whole narrative, if you're drinking, you kind of want your buddy back, your drinking buddy. And I get that. And so I just was in a bad place again so quickly. I couldn't believe it. In chapter 5 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's a chapter called How It Works. And it's, it lays out the steps, the 12 steps. And in the beginning of it, it says in the first part of the reading, that alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And I found that to be true. I remember just deep in my soul thinking, how did I get back here so fast? Because the first few days of drinking were okay. They were okay and manageable-ish. I was able to kind of pump the brakes a little bit and stop. But by, the time those 14 days had gone by, forget about it. I was so hung over on the morning of April 22nd, 2011, that I had to get up, and I told my husband, and this is back in the day when liquor stores were the only place where you could get booze, and you had to wait for the grocery stores to open if you wanted wine. So I thought, oh my gosh, I think the Chevron down the street has alcohol. This is the desperation, okay? I'm just explaining all of these thought patterns so that you can sort of see into the mind of an alcoholic or a substance use disorder. I don't know what they call substance use disorder victims. I don't know. Anyway, I call myself an alcoholic. That's what I call myself, an alcoholic in recovery. And so I told my husband, yeah, I think, I'm going to go to a meeting this morning is what I told him. I lied, got in the car, drove down to the Chevron, and I just was so sick. I was nauseous. I had all these physical withdrawal symptoms. I was shaking, and I just sat there in the parking lot waiting until 6 a.m. Because I knew that they could sell me champagne at 6 a.m. I mean, it sounds very sad now listening to myself say that. It sounds sad. It sounds pathetic. It sounds desperate. And that's where I was. And so I bought the champagne. I drank the bottle in the car, and I started my day. And I had to attend something at my kids' school. And then the rest of the day was all about keeping a safe enough buzz. And I use the word safe in quotes or italicized. It's, what a joke, a safe buzz. I don't know. It just sounds like the biggest oxymoron ever. And I remember driving to my hair person's house, my hairdresser's house, and wanting to bum booze off of her. I mean, just sad, just very sad. And that day I picked my kids up from school and I drove home, and I was hitting mailboxes along the way. And I read this part to you in the first episode from my book, Eternally Expecting. Chapter 1, it tells the story of my DUI. But essentially, I just was driving home in pretty much a blackout. We'll call it a brownout, which the differentiation between those two always cracks me up. Only alcoholics can know the difference between a blackout and a brownout. So I'm sorry, it's not a funny moment at all, but I had all four kids in my car and I got pulled over. And this is after hitting a lady's car and got pulled over. That's where we kind of pick up from last week when I ended that reading from Eternally Expecting. Um, the officer opened my car door and I could see his silhouette backlit. And I remember saying something to that cop like, okay, basically, I have to go now. I'm trying to get home. And not even registering that that was not what was going to happen. I was not going home. And I remember my neighbor came down and she picked up my kids for me, my four kids. And she put them in her car and she was going to drive them back up the hill. Now, this neighbor had, within the past few months, this neighbor had actually just been in court and seen her son be sentenced to prison because he had killed a couple people in a DUI. And I mean, I just shiver. Honestly, I shiver. I get like the hair on the back of my neck stands up when I think about this. Is that she had to watch all that and she had to help me as I was not capable anymore of caring for my kids that afternoon, arguably at all ever, during that season of my life. And so she took them home to safety. And the pain of that, the remembrances, the flashbacks that she must have had, terrible. I mean, she didn't yell at me. She didn't scream at me. She had compassion. I just don't even know how she did it. Anyway, I was taken to the local jail and I was, just fresh off of walking the line. I did that whole sober walk the line thing, sobriety test, and failed it. I chose not to be breathalyzed because some, intelligent and well-meaning person at the bar had advised me, hey, if you ever get pulled over, don't breathalyze because they can put you in basically a worse place if you breathalyze. And so, of course, I remembered that little piece of advice and took it and didn't realize that that was actually going to be my ticket to no questions asked, do not pass go, 1 year of a blow and go situation. And a blow and go is a breathalyzer basically in a car. I can't remember at this moment what the actual name is for it, but there's totally a name for it. Oh my gosh. This happens to me a lot. My brain fog is just at 46. I don't know. I mean, gone. Anyway, so after I refused to breathalyze, they loaded me up and took me to King County Jail. Sidebar, the name of this podcast, From Jail to Joy. Eternally Amy from Jail to Joy. That's where I got the idea, is my night in jail, my night in King County Jail, which I will tell you was the worst night of my life thus far. It was the worst night, and it was also the best night, but it sure didn't feel like it then. And it sure was only apparent later that was one of the best nights ever that I've had. Because, that's what they say, right, about rock bottom. These little slogans. Rock bottom is the firm foundation on which I built a new life. And you know what I'm here to tell you is that is true. That is a true statement for me. That night that I was taken to King County Jail, we first stopped at Harborview Medical Center, and I went immediately into a huge panic attack, and they were trying to get my heart rate down, and someone was screaming at me in the hallway, and I just freaked out. And, that was a little bit common during that time, was these constant panic attacks. And so I had these electrode things taped to my chest and everything. And they got me, to a safe point, and then they released me to the care of King County Jail. And I get there, and the brown bag lunch that they handed me, dinner, I guess, was a mystery meat sandwich. Hence, the first part of this podcast is called the mystery meat sandwich. It's kind of your welcome to jail grab bag, goodie bag, swag bag, whatever you want to call it. And I remember trying to call my dad from the payphones. It wasn't a payphone. That's the wrong term. It was some wall phone. And everybody was in there as this holding cell, and everybody's taking turns trying to use this phone. And of course, I couldn't remember anybody's number. My dad was staying at my house, so I'm calling my phone number, but it was my cell phone. I'm drunk, people, you know what I'm saying? So I couldn't remember anything. And then I get my photo taken, my mugshot, and I'm making jokes about Paris Hilton. And then they strip search you, and they give you your clothing, and they're peeling the electrodes off of me still. And it just was your basic nightmare. And I get into the elevator, and there's a guy next to me, and he's going to be dropped off at the guy floor. And we're standing there, we're riding up one of those big industrial elevators. And he turns to me and he goes, "Ask for socks." And I was like, "What?" He said, "Ask for socks. It's really cold in there." And that moment, I am not kidding, has stuck out in my mind since that time. That guy had the kindness to tell me, a little tip that was going to get me through this hard night and make it just a little bit easier. And I will never forget that as long as I live. He did not have to bother telling me that. Maybe they only had one pair of socks. And then if he told me that, maybe I would get the socks. I don't know. I mean, who knows? But he shared that little piece of information with me, and it was kind. It was super, super kind. And I did ask for socks. And he was right. I was freezing my ass off all night, just shaking. And I was just coming off of having alcohol in my system, so much alcohol in my system. And I was slowly coming to realize the magnitude and the depth of what I had done. And it was very sobering. Like, that is the perfect word for it. It was sobering. And I had this roommate, and she was there for what? I have no clue. But she kind of told me the deal on how things were going to go down from this point, and, how jail worked. And she was kind of a resident there for a period of time. And so she kind of knew the drill. And all night long, I just remember just tossing and turning, freezing, feeling so cold and so broken. I just remember feeling so devastated. I just couldn't believe that my life had come to this. I just could not believe it. Could not believe I had done what I had done. I could not believe I drove drunk with my kids in the car. And, it wasn't the first time. I just got caught that time. And for the first time, I started thinking about what they had taught me at rehab just a couple weeks earlier, and that alcoholism was a disease and that it wasn't my fault. And I thought, could they be right? Because it sure feels like a moral failure right now. I mean, I had no idea if I still had a marriage. I certainly had no idea if my kids were ever going to live with me again. CPS was going to come by my house. That much I knew. Someone had told me that, one of the officers. And so it was a long night. long night. And I just couldn't believe I was where I was. And, it just felt like, where'd the good church girl go? Where'd she go? And who am I now? Who is this person? In the morning, they opened our door, and we came out, had some kind of breakfast, and not long after that, they came and got me and said that my husband was waiting for me, and I went back downstairs to where I was processed earlier. They took me back down that elevator, and I got into my street clothes. I had a little tiny bit of battery left in my cell phone back from 2011. And so I called my husband, who was circling the block outside. He picked me up. And as you can imagine, it was the worst ride home known to man. We fought the whole way home. Actually, he was just expressing his feelings, and I was just sitting there just lower than low and beating myself up and feeling horrible, as I should. Not as I should in terms of, I had a disease and I didn't request that I had that disease. But here's the deal. When you are faced with the actions that you have done, you have committed, it sort of doesn't matter if you have a disease or not. I had to take responsibility for those actions. And I had to feel all those horrible feelings. And, it didn't matter. I mean, it did not matter. I had to feel it. And that's my journey, and that's my experience. I had to feel that shitty about myself. So we get back to the house, and Andrew tells me, go pack your stuff. You're going back to rehab. And that he had been advised that that's the best thing you could do in this situation is immediately go back to treatment. And so, I was just crying, taking a shower. I talked to CPS. They came. I don't know how they decided it was just an error in judgment, but they did. To this day, I'll never understand that. Just feel like that's God's grace right there that I so did not deserve. And then I said goodbye to my kids through tears. I prepared to go back to rehab. And my last drink was a glass of Chardonnay on the plane on the way down. My husband had taken all my money, and I had no credit cards. I had no nothing. And so I basically bummed some money off of the guy next to me. It bought me, I think he saw how terrible and pitiful I looked, and he bought me a couple Chardonnays. And that was my last drink, at least the last time I drank. And it is very important for me to remember that I could go pick up a glass of wine this afternoon if I wanted to. I'm over 21. I could invite that chaos right back into my life if I wanted to. And oh my gosh, do I not want that back? Even if I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that I wouldn't get out of control again, yeah, no thanks. Because the peace that I have today in my soul is not worth gambling. Oh, it's just not worth it. But that is another story. That is for next week. And so I did say that I would finish off with a little read. And so this will be from, again, A Vision for You. And here we go. This is page 202, but I'm on an ebook, so this is from the big book. We have shown how we got out from under. And that's because it's referring to earlier in the book when it shows the 12 steps and it sets out the program of action that those of us who are sober through 12-step communities go through. So anyway, we have shown how we got out from under. You say, yes, I am willing. But am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence are ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you. How is that to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? You are going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly, like people in a sinking ship. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds, high and low, rich and poor. These are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them, you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties, for you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself, that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as yourself. I just have to stop there because that's come true for me. That has come true for me without a shadow of a doubt. And 12-step fellowship is, in my experience for me, that is what healed me. And God healed me from, and my hard work healed me from alcoholism. I'm no longer in active alcoholism. And when you've been completely, helplessly captivated by a substance, to not have that in your life anymore, to have the freedom that I still have today after over a decade it's a miracle. It's a miracle. So I'll tell you more about that next week.
Finally, here's your bailout bag.
Ah, yes, the bailout bag. So for today, I would just leave you with this thought. Is there anything in your life that holds you captive, that you are just completely swallowed up by? That's for your bailout bag today. All right, it's Amy Liz Harrison. Be kind, rewind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. Keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.